Abolition 101 at City College. Today's topic is abolition and LGBTQ plus liberation. We will be having two speakers present to us. The first one from 6:10 to 6:40 will be Gay Shame, who will discuss LGBTQ liberation and transforming carceral logic with LGBTQ plus analysis alongside the nonprofit industrial complex. And then after that, from 6:40 to 7:10, CUAV, my apologies, will discuss abolition in connection to addressing violence in LGBTQI two-spirit communities. And then we will have a 10-minute break. Next slide, please. Uh-oh. Next slide. So first, I would like to start by, no worries. First, I would like to start by introducing myself. My name is Sean. I go by they, them. I am from Ohlone Territory. I still stay in Ohlone Territory. A brief visual description of myself. I'm a dark-skinned Black person wearing an unzipped black turtleneck. I'm wearing a bucket hat that's ashy gray with a blue, baby blue background. I would like to also pass it to my co-facilitator, Charlie, sorry.
Oh, good. So my name is Charlie and my pronouns are he, him. I was born and raised on Nishan Ohlone Territory. I now live on Ramaitush Ohlone Territory, aka so-called San Francisco. A visual description of me: I am a light-skinned, white-passing Latino with dark shoulder-length curly hair, a floral button-up, and behind me there are two fans, one of which is on, one of which does not work. There may be from time to time a small gray and white dog popping into the screen if he gets curious.
Thank you, Charlie. Next slide, please. So first of all, we want to acknowledge that so-called San Francisco, that's Charlie. I love that. Like, by the way, I could see you calling it that. Thank you. We want to first acknowledge that so-called San Francisco is located on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of the so-called San Francisco Peninsula. We encourage non-Indigenous members to uplift the work of rematriation and land taxes. And below is a link to where you can do so. Also, we want to be intentional with how we are creating Black, Indigenous, and POC-centered spaces. All right, this is very important. We want to move forward by creating practices to prioritize Black, Indigenous, people of color, and proactively decenter whiteness, right? And dismantle white supremacy, anti-Blackness, misogynoir, and colorism. Because of that, we will open our facilitated discussion to be open only to Black, Indigenous, people of color first, centering LGBTQ plus and disabled Black, Indigenous, people of color, with the last 5 minutes being open to all. We are mindful of creating Black, Indigenous, people of color centered spaces in the breakout rooms. Please DM the host if you are a white person so that we can mindfully arrange the breakout rooms. And I really stress that because it's really awkward when there's a group of people, when there's one person of color and there's a bunch of white people. You're speaking from an experience that a lot of people don't have and they really can't connect with you. So and that can turn out to be very harmful, and that's not what we want. The chat is open to everyone. However, we ask white people to please be mindful over taking up too much space. The Zoom sessions will continue to be open for anyone to join. Also, so we are asking people to contribute to our mutual aid fundraiser, right? So we want to be able to pay every speaker $50, right? And that comes out to be about $5,000, right? So I believe that living in the city, like if you can donate, you should donate, because we are fortunately we are in a space to where we can learn, right? And this is not on people of color at all, or Black or Indigenous people. Like if you want to donate, go ahead. But this is primarily asking white people to go ahead and donate and like sit there and, like help out. And so far, there's $625, which is dope. So thank you. So also we have collective care. In our abolition work, we want to center collective care and have a care team with Kari and Tiara as the leads. However, for tonight's session, we asked folks that need care, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color, prioritize to contact Tiara and Era for resources. Because at the end of the day, care is very important. We want to ensure that this class is not harmful for anybody, right? And like, so if you ever feel harmed, please reach out, right, to any of the coordinators that you feel that you need to reach out to. But we really ask folks to reach out to Tiara and Era for resources. Anyway, so I wanted to introduce gay shame, right? Gay shame is a virus in the system. We are committed to a trans queer extravaganza that brings direct action to spectacular levels of confrontation. We work collectively outside boring and deceptive nonprofit models to fight white supremacy, capitalism, ableism, cops, settler colonialism, and all forms of domination. Liberals think we are frivolous decorations, and mainstream gays want us gone. Against them and with each other, we instigate, irritate, and agitate to build cultures of devastating resistance. And I'll pass it back to you folks to go ahead and actually introduce yourselves. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Hi, my name is Clio Thatcher. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns. And just for a quick visual description, I'm a white passing person of Middle Eastern and white descent. I'm in a backyard in Oakland where I live on unceded Ohlone territory. And I'm a gender nonconforming person. I wear my hair long, I'm wearing a button up, and I apologize in advance for any sound. My internet wasn't working at home, so I'm borrowing a friend's.
Cool. I'm Toshio, and I am half Japanese American, half white, half Fu, for visual. And behind me is a Murphy bed in my apartment in the Tenderloin in San Francisco. And should we just talk about how we got involved with the org?
Honestly, right now is your time. So speak to whatever that you want to speak to, honestly.
Cool.
Try and ask if you can focus on queer liberation, however, whatever that means to you and however you want to speak about it, right? It's completely up to you.
Sounds good. So Gay Shame started out about 20 years back. I have not been involved that entire time, but a bunch of people got together on what people know as Tyre Beach on the east side of San Francisco. It was a response to the corporatization and the increasing police presence at Pride at that moment in time. And I guess at that moment in time, it still felt like things could go in different ways. But as anyone who has been to corporate Pride in the city might know, it is purely a place to, applaud police and watch Facebook and Google floats go by. And I think more straight people attend, straight identifying people attend Pride today than non. But yeah, since then, I mean, we've done a ton of different campaigns, but abolition wise, and Thatcher, feel free to jump in. I got involved because I was interested in abolition and like seeing what we could do with that through a queer lens, as part of the Critical Resistance, which is in Oakland. I was like helping out with their newspaper, and then also like just writing back to people who were inside and looking for some kind of connection or resources. Oftentimes I could not offer the second, unfortunately, but yeah. Thatcher, do you want to kind of talk
sure.
about how you came to gay shame?
Yeah, I became involved in gay shame when I was writing my senior thesis for my bachelor's degree about queer activism, and asked to interview members of gay shame. And so I had a great experience getting to have in-depth interviews with different folks. Gay shame was really welcoming to me, studying um, the dynamics around critique. I was interested in writing about how shit talking creates values and creates like the kind of morals of different groups, and how we like define ourselves by talking critically about other organizations or other people. Gay shame was delightful to talk to, and I ended up moving to the Bay Area to pursue tattooing, and joined the organization then around 2007. Um, yeah, I something that really struck me initially about gay shame around abolition was um, in the aftermath of an action that we did protesting a prison themed party, like circuit party, that kink.com put on. Some of our members were arrested in the aftermath of that in a really fucked up way. And it was really striking to me how immediately everyone showed up at the jail, everyone showed up for the transfer, people showed up for their people. And it's like such an obvious abolitionist practice, but it was different than any activist organization I'd been in before. Having that immediate jail support be an immediate reflex of the organization. So that's one of the things that kind of sealed the deal for me with gay shame.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into some of the work that we have been concentrating on, the anti-PIC work, which has recently mostly taken the form of like anti-gentrification work, because anti-gentrification work is definitely anti-PIC work. Please stop either of us if we use any acronyms that are not widely known.
PIC is one of them. I actually thank you for saying that, because I recently had to look up what PIC is. So if you can let folks know what PIC is, that would be dope.
Yeah, I see Charlie just put, yeah, a comment in the chat saying it's prison industrial complex, which is the kind of, as far as I can tell, the idea behind this class, and kind of how prisons, policing are part of just so many aspects of our lives, unfortunately, and they continue to like morph and grow in really horrible ways. And so gay shame is, you know, dedicated to doing what we can in small ways to stop that. And sometimes that will mean, as Thatcher mentioned when we did this, so kink.com, it was a porn producer that moved to Nevada, but before that, it was run out of the Armory in the Mission, not too far from like the Mission CCSF campus. And they had, in addition to some people out in Tel Aviv in Israel, were throwing these prison-themed gay pride parties that cost like $100 a ticket. So Gay Shame, along with other orgs, like we're like, this is, you know, this theme is not acceptable. So we ended up having kind of a big protest, and that led to some people getting jailed. So we were doing direct jail support there. In addition to that, we've done jail and prison support for people both here and then outside of the Bay, like more recently, Michael Johnson, who was in prison for years, only recently got out for allegedly, basically like bioterrorism because of alleged non-disclosure of HIV. And Thatcher has done some really cool art around that. So we were supporting Michael Johnson directly, just like writing and getting the word out, getting commissary cash to Michael, and then also like making sure that he didn't, as most people do, come out of prison with like nothing and nowhere to go to. Thatcher, do you want to talk about like an current like issue that we've sort of been trying to help with, the Indigenous Peoples Day 5?
Sure. Yeah. Sorry, I was let me backtrack just a little bit.
Yeah,
first.
totally.
Just that like something I really appreciate about Gay Shame is that it's really taking to task like the broader LGBTQ movement for prioritizing marriage and privilege consolidation and property ownership.
Thank you.
And it's like Gay Shame is like insisting on prioritizing folks of color, like poor people, people who are stigmatized, people who are drug users, like all these people who have been like just like totally hung out to dry by like the mainstream like white focused cis, you know, normative gay movement. And so that's just like a lot of how we're approaching it, is just as this like refusal to do what the gay movement in general has done, basically.
Right.
And the Indigenous Peoples Day 5 are a group of activists who are like heroes, as far as I'm concerned, for taking down a statue of, I'm spacing on his name, Sarah.
Junipero Sarah, yeah.
Junipero Sarah, in San Rafael. And they have been targeted, you know, like the cops have gone after them because there was footage, like cell phone footage of the statue coming down, and the Catholic Church was advocating for it to be a hate crime charge and was really pressing for felony charges for these activists. So we've written a statement in support of the Indigenous Peoples Day 5 and really encourage people to, like, if you see the petition, to sign it, just to like make a statement standing in solidarity with these activists for taking down these like colonizer statues.
Yeah, and they themselves have been doing a bunch of calls for solidarity, so we've joined some of those calls in terms of just you know, banner drops and some other things. Thank you, Thatcher, for like bringing things back, because I was like starting with the really granular, but as many people will know, the commercial corporate pride, pro-cop pride that we know today, it wasn't always like that, because it was actually 1 year after the Stonewall riots in New York City. San Francisco and New York both celebrated that day a year after, or that week actually, that were riots that happened in the West Village in New York City that were anti-cop riots because you know, at the time, just as today, cops went after people they identified as queer and trans and binary in particular. Here in San Francisco, we also, predating Stonewall, there's like a lesser known riot called the Compton's Cafeteria riot that happened in the Tenderloin. There's a pretty good movie documentary about it called Screaming Queens that people can check out about that, which is also like a night that like gender nonconforming people had enough of cops coming after them in the Tenderloin. And so that is where things were back in '69. Today, well, I also failed to mention that first Pride in New York, they actually specifically stopped by the New York Women's House of Detention to like acknowledge people like Afeni Shakur and Angela Davis, who were being held there at the time. So it was a different and much more radical event than your average Pride event today. And I mean, kind of like fast forwarding ahead, we have a very neoliberal kind of gay establishment. Large groups like Human Rights Campaign are, you know, fall over themselves to applaud not just like prison industrial complex or companies like big banks and military contractors and just basically just about anything bad you can think of. And meanwhile, the politicians that these organizations are often out there campaigning for have done little to help the vast majority of queer, trans, non-binary people. You know, they've passed little tweaks of policies that are meant to help people who are targeted by cops and prisons in some cases. However, in many cases, things like the LA County a couple of years ago built the first pod that is trans specific. And while some people have said that they do feel safer in a place that is all trans, allegedly, for the, you know, the cops get to decide who goes in, who makes it into that program. We have politicians out here like Scott Wiener, who is the gay politician who used to run the Castro and now is a state legislator. And he's been creating these little policies that you know, use a lot of resources to create, but do very little in actually helping people. So there is some more information about like his most recent, it's basically PR for these politicians to say that they helped and were very progressive on queer and trans issues, such as a recent bill that he passed that has only resulted in 4 people being transferred from 4 people who identify as femme or as women. 4 people since the program started. I want to say it was January 1st, 2020. Despite, you know, many applications to be transferred. On the other hand, you also have people like the abolitionist activist Cece McDonald, who's there's a documentary about Cece called Free Cece that's pretty good as well. Gay Shame has done some work with Cece, who is against the idea of gender responsive prisons, quote unquote. Also included in a folder that I'll share, like a note about the about Cece's kind of refusal to have people try to get her moved from a quote unquote men's facility to a quote unquote women's facility. Why she did not want that, and why using those resources would just feed into the system more. I feel like I just talked a lot without taking a breath.
Yeah, I to like piggyback on that, just like the I don't know, the reading that we asked for folks to look at, like kind of like asking to think of the prison industrial complex in this broader way that encompasses both jails, detention facilities, psych wards, all these places where people are held captive. And this, like, there's this tension that I think it would be really interesting to talk about if folks had questions or wanted to discuss this, about like how to create like abolitionist change that is still improving the the situation for people who are incarcerated, but without contributing to building those structures or like contributing to them. So that's just something that I'm curious to hear your thoughts on as the night goes on.
Yeah, and it looks like, so Ira asked a question about the connection between gentrification and housing, houselessness, and how it ties into queer abolition and liberation that Gay Shame works towards. Can definitely speak to that.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Oh no, please go ahead.
I just wanted to say that Safe Space book by Christina Hanhart is like totally amazing about like the connection between gentrification and the policing of like low income queer people of color, and like especially it's like focused in San Francisco and in New York, but it's like a really cool book. I'll put it in the chat.
Just I think I might have beat you to it. Yeah, there's a lot of cool interviews. I mean, there's so much history, of course, in San Francisco of fighting back against the police. The White Night Riots was another huge moment when queer people literally set fire to lots of cop cars because of, well, that was in reaction to the outcome of the quote unquote justice system, which did not decide to prosecute a former cop named Dan White for the killing of Harvey Milk, who was the former supervisor of the Castro. But yeah, going back to Ira's question and why Gay Shame's main focus has recently been on gentrification. I mean, San Francisco is kind of like an innovator in terms of brutality against houseless people. And also it's just kind of the way that it ignores and disrespects like people who need basics like shelter when the city is still funding the cops, increasing the cop budget, increasing most likely, although one of our jails, so San Francisco right now has 7 jails in just San Francisco, not Bay Area. And one big recent win was the closure of that some of us at Gay Shame were involved with to a certain extent, and also I think people from CUAV too, was a closure of 850 Bryant, which has been known to be like in a certain magnitude earthquake. Everyone in the jail, if you've ever been in the jail, it's like it's in the basement. You go down like a bunch of steps to get down there, and it's basically a death trap. So they're finally moving people out of 850 Bryant, but we are watching whether or not they are going to replace that with conservatorship, like quote unquote mental health jails. And sorry about taking up a little bit more space.
No, you're all good. Like, honestly, that was quite perfect. And I want to thank you folks for your like presentation in the first place. I want to say I've been to a few meetings at Gay Shame, and like I just want to applaud you folks for being as radical as you are. Like, it's just like it was so radical. I was just like, wow, I've never met so many like white people so ready to just like fuck shit up. It's pretty cool. And people of color, obviously.
Yes, and first, thank you, Toshio and Clio from Gay Shame for sharing your wisdom with us. And now it is my extreme pleasure and honor to introduce the folks from CUAV. I will start with Dominique. Dominique, who uses she, her pronouns, is a Bay Area native dedicated to transforming trauma and violence into opportunities of liberation. She is honored to share tools of trauma-informed yoga, mindfulness, and ecotherapy to communities of color and folks who identify as LGBTQ+I2S, or lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, intersex, and two-spirit. She currently works as the Healing Justice Program Director at Community United Against Violence, or CUAV, in San Francisco, California. And Lidia Salazar, also she, her, is a Latinx two-spirit queer organizer, advocate, community herbalist. I lost track of where the email was. Oh goodness. Community herbalist and a survivor of violence who is now the co-executive director at CUAV. And a little bit about CUAV. is that CUAV is an LGBTQI2S anti-violence organization that supports the healing and leadership of survivors of intimate partner violence, hate violence, and violence from law enforcement. Lidia is also a member of California's Partnership to End Domestic Violence and sits on the Policy Advisory Council, which provides guidance to the partnership on the issues impacting survivors. And last but not least, Lidia is also a policy co-chair of the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs, NCAVP, which strives to increase the safety and resources of LGBTQI survivors of violence through policy and education. So Dominique and Lidia, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much. Blessings, everyone. I guess before we even start the slides, I would love us to take a moment. And of course, anything I say is 200% optional. But what I would really love us to do is get into our bodies if that feels comfortable and safe for you. This work isn't just cerebral, it's also embodied, and it's also inviting us to think about our hearts and also, how we're deeply impacted on a personal level. And so if it feels comfortable for you, of course, the invitation is to bring your hands into, or interlocking your hands here, and then bringing them to your heart space. And if it feels all right to drop into your breath, I invite you to notice what's going on. How is your breath flowing in this moment? As you inhale and as you exhale, what are you feeling like you can honor? What's feeling alive in your heart? And I also want to take a moment to respect your grief, your rage, your uncertainty. We in some time, so your exhaustion is welcome here. It's welcome in this movement, and it's necessary, right? So I invite us to take another round of breath if that feels okay to you. Maybe inhaling through the nose and exhaling the sigh out the mouth. Yeah, thank you so much. It's helpful for me as well. So yeah, thank you again for being here. Presence is a practice. And so I know that it already feels like a long week. So thank you for just being a part of this and bringing your whole self. I forgot to do a visual description, so let me do that as well. I'm a brown-skinned femme with a multicolored head wrap on, dark red lipstick, 2 nose piercings on my left, a gold Nefertiti chain, and green sweater tank top that I'm regretting right now. My Zoom background is known as the Aurora Borealis, but it's a swirling green and yellow kind of situation going on. Yeah. Okay, and if we can get to the slides, that would be dope right now.
Yes, I will have it. Oh, Gracie got it. Okay, I'll be back up on slide then.
Cool, thank you so much. So most of the work that we do in our trainings, we really want them to be interactive. So I'm just noticing a little bit of sadness and not being in person together. But we'll do our best to make sure we're getting some voices and some feedback around here. If you can go to the next slide, that would be dope. Yeah, cool, thank you. So yeah, what I really want to start us off with is the fact that our people have always known what to do and how to show up and show care for each other. In the face of genocide, of enslavement, of displacement, of so many different things, we've had many ways to come back to the land and come back to each other. And so I really want us to, just take a reflective moment and send out some gratitude for the folks that are seen and also the folks that are unseen that have gotten us here today. Also the elements, right? Of earth, of fire, of water, that move around us and also that are within us. And so I ask us to really take a moment, and even if you want to drop it in the chat, what are some strengths or resilience you inherit from your ancestors? and I'll read some off once they come through. Literally everything. I love that. Yes. My ability to set boundaries. Yes, Charlie. What else y'all got? Finding my way, community and unfamiliar environments. Yes. So good. Arab American skepticism of the American government. Fuck yes, good job. This is amazing. Maybe a couple more. Yeah, I think certain ancestors support you in certain situations. Yeah, that's brilliant. I know I'm in a lot of spaces where it's like, not all the ancestors we want to call in. Like, what about the elevated ones, the ones that are trying to push us towards liberation, right? So we got to be kind of specific and discern. I also see mental, emotional, and spiritual strength. Yeah, thank you so much. Cool. So I would love to go to the next slide. So yeah, keep them coming in if it feels like you're comfortable doing that. Yeah. I can pass it to you, Lidia, or would you like me to go?
Yeah, I can go. Hey everyone, my name is Lidia, she and her pronouns, and I am a brown skin Latinx two-spirit person, and I have wavy black hair, and I'm wearing a black t-shirt, and I have a virtual background of Lake Siskiyou with trees and mountains and a lake. And so how many of y'all have heard about CUAV before? Cool. All right. Can I get one person to tell me what you know about CUAV?
I was just gonna say, I really know really quickly from the bio, right, that I learned a new acronym that I'm going to incorporate as much as I possibly can. But I know that it recognizes and it supports the indigenous two-spirit people as well. And I think that's hella rad.
Great, thank you, Sean. Yes, so we're an LGBTQ two-spirit organization that supports LGBTQI two-spirit folks that have survived violence. So violence from the police, intimate partner violence, and intimate partner violence, domestic violence, and hate violence. And so we've been around since 1979, during a time that there was increased police violence and the Castro riots happening. It was after the Compton cafeteria riots and the murders of George Moscone and Harvey Milk. And our folks were trying to answer the question, how can we keep ourselves and each other safe? Since obviously we weren't able to rely on police for safety. And so a group of community members came together and formed CUAV in 1979, started off with a whistle campaign. So we still do this till this day, but we have these cute little whistles that we hope to send y'all soon after, but whistles to let folks know when violence was happening so that folks could come out and take care of each other, right? Really show up in strong numbers to support one another when we were in trouble. And so around 1981, we started to see the need to address the violence that was happening within our community. So really noticing how intimate partner violence needed to be addressed. And there wasn't an organization in San Francisco or in the country really that was supporting queer and trans folks specifically that were going through DV. So then at that time, CUAV became a nonprofit and started providing services to not just hate violence and police violence survivors, but also to intimate partner violence survivors. And so Yeah, so we have abolitionist roots, and till this day, we have an abolitionist framework. We'll get more into our frameworks in the next slide, but can we move on to the following one, please? Thank you. I wanted to share a little bit about our programs, and I'll let Dominique take this one.
Yeah, thank you, Fran. So yeah, as you can imagine, we've been around for, I think this is our 42nd year. So our programs have looked so different. What we're doing now, and of course, because of the pandemic, we're offering remote. So we're still online and doing phone, but peer counseling. So we offer short-term counseling sessions. It's advocacy based. So we are not mental health professionals or clinicians, but we all are trained in how to work with survivors of domestic violence. And so short term looks like anywhere between 4 sessions to 8 sessions, sometimes even more, with the hope that folks can get into our support groups and really start to reduce that isolation that they feel when they have experienced trauma and violence. And so with the peer counseling, we also have the route through is our safety line. So we are not a 24-hour crisis line. We had one in the past, but it's actually a warm line. So somebody you can call in and then give a couple of days, we respond back and start to work with folks through there. Our support groups. So Take Care Tuesday is something that we also, if you're interested in this, feels like there's some resonance for you, we would love to connect with you. This is open to all queer and trans survivors of violence. We really do a focus on wellness skills and community building, relationship building. Healing Justice is one that is very near and dear to my heart. It's a seasonal groups. And so in the spring, we do healing through art and mindfulness, focusing on embodiment. We focus on emotional healing and the ways that it impacts our bodies, really. And using art and of course mindfulness tools. So the one coming up in the fall that I would love for y'all, if you're interested, to connect, we're calling it Queer and Trans Survivorship, Reclaiming Possibilities for Care and Interdependence. So really focusing on the ways that, as Lidia had spoken to, interpersonal violence and state violence and how it's impacting us in our relationships. And so we're talking about PTSD symptoms. We're also talking about the ways that we have internalized so much of these harms and violence. And so also we provide service provider trainings, mostly to DV agencies and to other partners in San Francisco and even beyond. Our most popular or most common one is supporting queer and trans survivors self-determination. We talk about principles to work with queer and trans survivors, common myths, barriers and obstacles, DV assessments. We try to pack so much in, it's not even a joke, and scenarios as well. There's so much we could talk about. And then also understanding violence is another training we do that's 3 hours and really talks about the root causes of violence and the many forms of it, of oppression. Yeah, maybe next slide. And I'll pass it to Lidia.
Yeah, so at CUAV, we call folks that come through to work on their healing participants instead of clients, because they're participating in their own healing. And we take that very serious, right? Like it is they're coming to CUAV, and it is our responsibility as folks that are supporting survivors to support their self-determination. And so part of that looks like supporting their leadership through the Survivors Advocating for Freedom Today. We call it the safety program. And so this is an opportunity for folks who are interested in developing leadership skills in order to do organizing around abolition and immigrant rights, to engage in this program. We have like a monthly membership political education meeting, and we also have one-on-one leadership, like emotional support / coaching sessions to develop skills such as like public speaking, facilitation, and other skills that are useful when we're trying to build a stronger movement to, really address the root causes of violence. And so we do organizing through coalition work. CUAV is a very, very, very small organization. Although we've been around since 1942, we literally went down from a size of like 20 people in, I don't even know, like the 90s to now being a staff of 5. So we're a really tiny organization. We're trying to do all the things, and we can do this through relationships that we have through these with community members and coalition. And so one of the coalitions that we're a part of, Toshio had mentioned, is the Known USF jail fight that we've been a part of since the beginning. And so really happy to be working with folks through that coalition to, really stop, one, that big victory of stopping that jail from being built, a new jail from being built, and then the second victory recently to close down 850 Bryant. And now we're really trying to make sure that they don't turn that into another jail. And so I do want to mention that the folks that come to CUAV, most of our members, like long-term like participants, have been were formally incarcerated. And so for us, it is absolutely important to address oppression and to really abolish these systems that are causing more harm and more trauma to survivors. Because a lot of times folks are using survivors to ask for like more policing in jails. And we're there to be like, no, actually, us as survivors are saying, no, we don't need any jails. We don't need, we don't need any more policing, because these are the systems that are actually causing more harm in our communities. And so love the Known USF Jail Coalition and all our partners there. And we're also part of the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs, which is an LGBTQ organization, LGBTQ coalition that has, I believe, 18 programs across the country. Some are really mainstream orgs, and then there's a few organizations that are dedicated to an abolitionist framework and mission. And so we do a lot of policy work to try to decriminalize domestic violence, which y'all probably know that the DV movement historically has been built on asking for more incarceration. But the thing that has often been like left out is that people of color, queer and trans folks, from the beginning of the DV movement have been fighting for like transformative approaches to end domestic violence. And so like now that's actually being presented and talked about more as we try to ask for more support services for survivors, but also calling for like to decriminalize DV, which is really complicated, very difficult, but we're trying to do it with the help of many folks that have been in this movement for a really long time. And then you can see all of these other organizations or coalitions that were a part of the Free SF, which stands for the Full Rights Empowerment and Equality. They're an immigrant rights coalition. And right now, recently we were working on a bill called the Vision Act. That was a state bill to try to stop folks that have served their time in prison from being deported to ICE. That bill now is going to be extended to a 2-year bill because they decided not to vote on it last week. We're trying really hard to pass it without any amendments. And so we'll let y'all know how you can plug in to support that bill. But you can find all of this information on our website, which I believe was included. But if we can go to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. Dominique, you want to take this?
Yeah.
Thank
you for all your brilliance. So yeah, give me 1 second. Okay. So we wanted to just quickly touch on CUAV's frameworks and how we do the work that we do and what leads us into the programs and the coalitions that we're a part of. And so to start, I'm just gonna go over self-determination feels like I don't know how many times we've said it, but it really is something that is so important of remembering that our people know what they need and that they're experts of our lives, and how often it's been taken away from us. And so the work that we do is really remembering. I know that a lot of movement leaders talk about memory work and culture work. And so for us, it's so aligned. The second one is language justice. And so we make sure everything that we do is both in English and in Spanish, knowing that a lot of services they create barriers when it's only in English. And so we want to make sure we always have interpreters, 2 interpreters to join to make sure English to Spanish, Spanish to English. Again, for folks to be as comfortable as possible to speak the language they feel most familiar with. The third one is popular education. We know y'all have hella wisdom, so we want to hear that. We want to create this rich, I want to say juicy conversation, because our lived experience is just as important than what we've maybe studied or professionally. Anti-oppression, yes. Understanding violence, where are the root causes of this violence? We focus so much on expressions, but what's underneath that? Why is this what is the cyclical nature of it? Anti-criminalization, transformative justice, providing alternatives to policing, alternatives to community safety and care. Harm reduction. So y'all already talked about it before. Thank you, Gay Shame. So we don't create any other barriers to access. We know that folks use for many, many reasons, and that shouldn't be a reason why they shouldn't access healing, really. So people power, yes. Healing justice and trauma stewardship. And Lidia, is there anything else you want to add to this one?
Abolition is our framework too. We've been being louder and bolder about that. And so I just wanted to mention that. We forgot to put it on there this time.
Yeah, and I think what comes up for me around that too is that we know that there are survivors that actually do want to call law enforcement. And so what we do is we treat it as safety planning. So we talk about what are some of the expectations? What are some of the threats that may happen if you do involve law enforcement? We don't force anybody not to, but we don't entangle with law enforcement or police, knowing that there's a higher risk of threat for our people. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Awesome. So the framework that we're going to focus a lot more on, y'all can tell I'm so excited about it, is healing justice. And really healing justice to me, I think has really supported my own radical self-love journey and understanding how my personal wellness has to be connected to the collective. What are we doing then, right? And so to me, healing justice has always been under the umbrella of creating something new to affirm and validate queer and trans lives and folks that are most impacted by state violence. So I want to pause and just see, have y'all heard of healing justice? What do you know about it? You can drop it in the chat, come off mute, wave your hand, say something. I see smiles. Sean, would you like to answer?
Yeah, I did hear about it, but I had a really quick comment about the entire thing in general. I think it's really cool that you are a healing space for people for queer folks that had experienced violence in the first place. I think that's super, super rad. But I think healing justice to me means people taking accountability for their actions, right? And people learning from said actions. I had grown up and I had experienced domestic violence firsthand. And I put something in the quote or in the chat that a lot of times when people like are imprisoned, it makes the situation that much worse, because unfortunately when they are in prison, a lot of times the violence that they experience, or people that are in prison experience, are like a lot worse. So, and like, you know, they take that with them to the house. So I think healing justice is been getting to the root problems of these things and figuring out what it is that is like having people, or a lot, or what it is that makes people think that it's acceptable to behave in violent ways. And I think that's really what healing justice is just accountability and therapy and resources.
So, wow, thank you. And I really appreciate the personal story and the vulnerability that you just shared with us. So thank you for that. Really brilliant. And you just spoke to so much, I think. Yeah, so I don't really have to add too much more. Thank you. I do want to give us the opportunity, though, to add for the Shire space, if we could actually play around with this. And so I'm going to drop a Padlet link in the chat. And if you can open that up, give folks a moment. And I'm going to invite folks to just think about what healing justice means to you. It could be an image, which is really dope. You can add that. It can be a word. It could be anything, really. And so what you can do, once you click on that link, the bottom right, there's a plus sign. Hit it, and then let's do the damn thing. And the question again is, what does healing justice mean to you? And let me know if you're not able to access it, if there's any issues on your end. They're coming in. Okay, I'm going to read a few. Emphasis on care and compassion, healing of those harmed, those who have harmed, and abundant community love, support, so the harm doesn't happen again. Yes. Abolition of barriers to healing. I love the way that you frame that. Mental health care, free on demand. Access to care that is consensual, trauma-informed, politicized, and accessible. Healing justice means that we as a people must care and help each other in order to survive this society. These are so beautiful. Thank you for contributing to this. Community-based healing outside of structures of policing. Care provided as defined by those who require it. So listening and uplifting the voices of the most marginalized and impacted. Yo, my heart is just like growing right now. Thank you for this. Keep it going. Keep adding to it. And just recognizing the fact that healing doesn't have one definition. And then healing justice doesn't have just one definition. And that there is a history that we do need to honor and uplift. So if we can actually go back to the slide, I want to, and then the next slide, please. Awesome. Okay. So healing justice as a movement was created by queer and trans people of color, Black and brown femmes, working class, poor, disabled, and Southern rural healers. The term wasn't a phrase until the early 2000s, but healing justice was practiced during the civil rights movements of 1960s to 1970s. And even way before then, with the use of ancestral practices of herbs, acupuncture, Reiki, touch, prayer, and collective ceremony, again, at the face of enslavement, genocide, mass deportation, environmental emergencies. Most notably, Kara Page and the Kindred Healing Justice Collective introduced this term when they realized that the fight for justice was not worth killing the spirits and bodies of those who were desiring liberation and determination for our communities. In 2006, activists in the southern states of the United States began to notice the high levels of burnout, mental and physical health issues, and extreme exhaustion from organizers and service providers. There were healing justice practices spaces for activists and freedom fighters to prioritize their well-being. So really the big questions that they started to ask each other was, how is the role of healing inside of systems of oppression? How do we define wellness and safety that allows agency and autonomy? How do we build resilience and collective power? And so I think I'm seeing in the chat that we may have gone over. Yeah, thank you. Challenging to stop right now, and that's okay. I just wanted to make sure that we remember that there is a long legacy of this work, and that queer and trans people have always looked at abolition and liberation in a way of, if we haven't seen it, then we're going to create it. Then we're going to see something different, and we're going to bring our people together and find ways to bring joy, to center creativity, to bring the resources, to care for one another, not even just in nonprofit situations, but beyond. It's happening in so many other ways. And so, yeah, I want to kind of just stop here and then see if Lidia, did you want to add anything to this space too?
Yeah, just one other emotion that we try to talk about more at CUAV is anger, right? Like we have the right to be angry. We have the right to show rage and be upset and break shit, and and that's part of healing too. Organizing and creating something, destroying things that are harmful for us and our communities, and building things that are going to be affirming and loving and uplifting to us in our communities. And so just wanted to bring that in, and we have some resources that we'll share afterwards for y'all to, if you're curious to know, brainstorm some ideas around what transformative approaches can look like when violence occurs. We have a couple exercises that we can share with y'all afterwards, and check out our website for more information on events.
Thank you, both of you, for that amazing presentation, for sharing your wisdom and experiences with us. We are now going to be moving into a 10-minute break. So we will be coming back around 7:25. Everyone, please feel free to get up, stretch, grab water, run to the bathroom, whatever you need to take care of yourselves, and we'll be back in a few.
Okay, we would like to welcome everybody back to the session. Um, I wanted to start off by saying thank you to all of our presenters, because without you, like, we couldn't have this space. So thank you all very much. Um, I wanted to start off by asking the presenters what, like, in your wildest dreams, how can the CCSF collective in this space be of use to you? Or how it was just worded right now, in your wildest dreams, how do you imagine us building an abolitionist world, and how does this vision overlap with City College?
Um, is it all right if I go first?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I'm Clio Thatcher, and on a personal note, I'm a psychiatric survivor with bipolar, and so a lot of my personal experience with has been with psychiatric incarceration, hospitalization, and so a lot of my visioning for a world that I want to see, like the abolitionist future, is creating spaces for people who are in mental health distress to have free housing, to have healthcare, to be able to be mad and not be policed the way they are so aggressively. We see in San Francisco, like, people with mental health problems getting like swept up by cops. And so yeah, just imagining places like, just like even apartments where people can share them and have access to care and stuff, is part of my vision. Thank you for asking that question too.
No,
And
thank
the,
you. Oh, sorry. So, no,
my
you're all.
bad.
I just want to say really quickly, thank you, because that was like a really dope ass answer. And like, that was just great. I work in harm reduction, which is unfortunately a nonprofit industrial complex, the place that I work for, right? And the shittiness of it is that it needs people to be in a certain living condition in order for it to operate. And that's what makes it trash. As with all nonprofit industrial complexes. However, I would like to say that, like, a lot of the times a lot of people experiencing homelessness and drug addiction, and a lot of times it's intersected. A lot of times people, I don't know how to say this, but they express anger in the way that they need to express their anger, and like you just said, it is policed. So I really, like, I agreed so hard. That was amazing. Thank you. And then Toshio, if you wanted to go ahead next, go ahead.
Just wanted to applaud Thatcher's work with a group that is based out of, they have Oakland and Sacramento chapters currently, Mental Health First, which is a hotline that you can call. I don't have the hours, but I can drop a link. And it's basically, as CUAV also offers some of these services, another way to not have to, feel like you are left with one choice, calling the cops in cases of, where there's harm happening, especially as more people are being forced out onto the streets. Like, there was never really an eviction moratorium in California. Like, sheriff's offices have continued to evict people throughout the pandemic, and yet we have even more layers of policing. Like, I would envision a world without a nextdoor.com, or like a 311 that just acts as like lightweight 911, or Urban Alchemy, which is this privately contracted. They wear like the black and green vests. So a lot of them around different neighborhoods, including the Tenderloin. A private security that's funded by the city, BART cops, there's the Muni, quote unquote, ambassadors, so many layers of really extremely expensive, police out there, and people who are experiencing homelessness are usually the among the top targets. A lot of people who are experiencing homelessness are also experiencing some, psychiatric illnesses. Anyway, yeah, so check out Mental Health First also, I would say, and hopefully there will be more Mental Health First in the future. One other form of cops that I know that some people at CCSF have organized against and getting them off campus is like CCSF having its own like police department. And there's also work being done at like the CSUs and the UCs to get cops off campus, because these are separate police departments on top of the police departments that the cities where all these colleges already exist. It's like that's where all the money's going. So I would envision a world where those things are wiped away.
1000% agree. Once again, everybody's answers are just hella fire right now. I just can't even handle this. Do either Lidia or Dominique want to give their answers? The question being, once again, in your wildest dreams, right? Let me find it again. How do you imagine us building an abolitionist world, and how does this vision overlap with city college?
Well, first of all, I just want to say, I'm really grateful and to be speaking with y'all today and learning from y'all, and the fact that y'all are spending so much time talking about abolition is beautiful, because we need to, that's my wildest dreams, having more conversations of what abolition looks like and what we can build in the future, what we're building now, right? It doesn't have to be this epic one-time event moment, this is what it is, but we're building things. We have been, our communities have been building, new realities, new ways of healing. And so I would just want to uplift that this work has been happening, is happening, and will continue to happen. And my hope is that we can continue to resource it and make time for it, and also to remember that survivorship is complicated, right? That we can cause harm too. As a survivor myself, I have caused harm. I'm also formerly incarcerated, and so understanding the complexities of that is super important, so that we're not creating this binary of good versus bad. And that abolition has to include not just the jails and policing, but also other systems that are extremely harmful, including ICE and the medical industrial complex, and even nonprofits sometimes. I hope that our communities can be so resourced and independent and autonomous that we can take care of one another without relying on institutions that are just further oppressing us.
Dude, another solid answer. I just cannot. And then to you, thank you all so much. And then to you, Dominique, same question.
Yeah, I echo what Lidia said in terms of just want to say thank you for this opportunity to speak with you all, and the fact that you have put so much energy and effort into this work, and knowing that it's going to be a lifelong thing, right? It's a practice that we commit to. So I think my answer is that we see it as a daily practice and that we see it as like something that happens within every interaction that we have, you know. I took some notes, of course, but also that we can really reflect on the ways that what we've been conditioned and learned are also starting to perpetuate in our and sometimes in our interpersonal relationships. And so almost like doing less of the blame, like the pointing outward, but being like, oh shoot, how am I doing that right now? How is this showing up? How do I be more gentle and more compassionate with myself? I would also just love to see a shift in consciousness around people seeing a responsibility to each other. I know, like, when I share our work with other folks, there's like deer in the headlights, like, oh my gosh, when we all have a responsibility if we witness or see or have experienced forms of trauma or violence, and like we can talk about our stories, or we can, you know, of course, if we feel safe enough to do so. But yeah, and then like to what Lydia was saying in terms of honoring each other's complexities and our humanity, I would love to see that. It feels very fluffy, but it's something that I always think about and dream about. And I think y'all are doing it already at this level of having this course. Like I've never even seen this before. So thank you for visioning that and putting it into practice.
No, thank you all for being here. I'm an Africology major at SF State, and I realized one of the ways, there are many ways of putting forth to the community. And one of the ways that I learned that works for me best is this thing called being an activist intellectual, right? Robbing universities and institutions of what they know and using it against them to sit there and cripple them, you know. And I think like all are saying, we're moving towards a goal, and we're moving towards it in different ways, but we're all trying to slay the same giant. You know, it's just that everybody has their lane, and they need to stick to it straight up.
Right, and was that yeah, okay. So I, real quick though, I do want to push back on the use of the word cripple as a verb to you know, to denote something negative, you know, because it is a slur against people with physical disabilities. So I just wanted to point that out real quick. But what we're gonna do next is opening the Q&A session for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And that will be for, oh goodness, what's the time frame for that? I think I lost it when I restarted my computer.
Until 7:45.
7:45. And then after that, we will open it up a bit for the entire community. But again, this first section of the Q&A and discussion will be focused on and centering, you know, our Black community members, our Indigenous community members, and our community members of color.
And really quickly, I wanted to thank you, Charlie, for saying that. I wanted to acknowledge that, and I wanted to apologize for my wrongdoing. Yeah, like that one. Like, I think that's why we at one point said, I think people need to be more slow with how they speak, right, and be more conscious of how they speak, because like then there are like situations like this to where people use offensive language. So I really wanted to thank you for pointing that out, and I wanted to apologize to everybody. Thank you.
Ooh, and we do have an anonymous question to open things up. Someone is asking, what are your collective care strategies in your abolitionist organizing?
One thing that I would say that often gets overlooked is a lot of times groups might like continue to pursue like a campaign or a project that maybe has just been kind of like the energy for it has fizzled, and there's always something else to work on. You can work on abolition from so many different angles. So if you find that you know, a sort of angle that you've been like can't believe we're having to have another meeting about this, it's totally legitimate, as Gay Shame has done at times, to just kind of like shift and start working on something else. Maybe you come back to that previous project, maybe you don't, but like make sure that there is some collective joy in the work that you're doing, and that will like automatically produce some like more energy, and it's more likely, I think, to bring more people into what you're doing long term.
Hey, also really quickly, I want to add that today is Derek Gaines' birthday. He was like, sorry, this is hella random. But at the end of the day, trigger warning, pigs doing pig shape, right? I'll give you a second to like either leave or whatever. Okay. But yeah, so today's Derek Gaines' birthday. He was tragically murdered by a pig. And I just wanted to like let everyone like please keep him in your thoughts, right? Because like this work is this work is to benefit other BIPOC people in the future. Sorry for that like interjection. I just wanted to say that really quickly.
Yeah, thanks for that moment. I think what also comes up for me and feels related to grief when that's present, being really just realistic about when you're burnt out, and having, you know, at CUAV, we've been having a lot more conversations around trauma stewardship and recognizing like we don't want to be robots in this movement, in this work. And so it has a deep impact on us. And so we are really trying to put in place like accountability kind of partners where like I've had Lidia call me and be like, hey, I'm kind of concerned with you. What's going on? And, you know, there's a deep level of trust and intimacy in that when someone can really share with you how they feel and that they want you to be well so you can show up. And so to me, trauma stewardship is something that feels really important to recognize when, as Toshio said, like when there is an energy, but also when we're like going in a different direction of like harming ourselves and maybe harming each other. So I think just being realistic.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that accountability, because I've been called in several times myself by Dominique and others at CUAV when folks are concerned, and I really do take that to heart. I mean, it feels good to know that I'm like cared for and that I'm seen, and so I like to show that as well. And I just want to echo the bringing in joy. Like I love playing in nature, making plant medicine, and just like putting my feet on that earth, because it is really helpful in just like releasing that trauma, that my own trauma, and then the vicarious trauma that I'm holding while I'm supporting folks in community. And so joy, laughter, having fun, letting myself be angry, being angry with other people and talking about it has been really healing.
Yeah, I really appreciate what our co-presenters were saying about self-determination, and like I'm just learning how to be a better friend and be a better community member by like listening or taking cues of what like the self-determination is of people, like what kind of support they want, and you know, always like offering to show up if a friend's in the hospital, if a friend goes to jail, like if you can, you know, do mutual aid to bail them out, like all of the things that we do to show each other care and try to fight against how isolating and stigmatizing the prison industrial complex and criminalization is. Like, you know, visiting, like letter writing stuff, just like shout out to like, I don't know, there are so many cool like organizations doing letter writing and keeping connected with our queer and trans like community members who are incarcerated. And so, yeah, just like a lot of it, I feel like is the same skills that it takes to be a good friend is what I try to work on.
Wonderful. Thank you for your answers to that. And I am seeing a hand from Deirdre. Would you like to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, y'all. My name is Deirdre. I use she, they pronouns. I'm on Ohlone land in so-called Oakland. And I would love to hear, going back to LGBTQ plus and going back to queerness, because I believe in my abolitionist practice that trans, queer, NB, we're the ones with the vision for the future, because that is what we've been creating in our life for our whole lifetime. We have been creating spaces for ourselves to live within a binary, within the society. So stepping away from the negative burden that we oftentimes feel from society, I was wondering if you would talk a little bit more about how you connect to abolition through queerness, and how, yeah, just kind of speak to it as just like a different way of thinking about where we're going and thinking about how we can lead and what we give to abolition that people that aren't a part of the LGBTQ community, you know, yeah, just our own little flavor, our own different flavor.
I'll go. I really appreciate that question. It's like madness and queerness are really interlocked for me, and so in my experiences, like with um, with psychiatric incarceration and with being arrested over mental health stuff, has always intersected with my gender presentation and with my sexuality. And I feel like the things that I've learned from queer people growing up, queer and non-binary and trans, and like just the like street smarts, the perspective, the political education, like all of the things that I've been given by queer people in my life who were bringing me into queer community have informed like how like outraged I was when I was experiencing like psychiatric incarceration, and then like having, yeah, just I'm like, it's like a flood of like memories of like, you know, the benefits of being out or not as trans and gender binary, or gender non-binary in psychiatric institutions and stuff. Like all of this like kind of co-created like identity that goes together really informs like my politics and helps me like ground in love like what I do for community and how I like hope to transform the world. I don't know, it's like a little bit big, but
I like that question also because it kind of it necessarily helps us remember that the people that have done like most of the work to help other queer people survive, including people who are incarcerated or being like overly or being policed, period, for just, you know, kind of who they are. They are low income, they're POC, they're disabled, and right now, like the people with the loudest voices or the most space in, like, you know, mainstream media tend to not be people who are representing any of like those very intersectional spaces, or not from those spaces. So just, yeah, pushing back against things like what Thatcher had mentioned earlier, you know, this idea that what a few very privileged gay guys in general do, which is like silence everyone else who's identifies as queer and trans, and just for their own kind of benefit. And yeah, just make sure that more people are not taking the say like the HRC, like the biggest you know, supporter of like throwing all this money at gay marriage, to which, you know, that's a whole other conversation, but gay marriage and like getting, you know, military like the don't ask, don't tell policies overturned, you know, were those the most important issues to people who are low income, POC, and I would say that, like, no, like those weren't the issues, but that's where all of the resources went for a long period of time. So yeah, we just need to like take the bullhorn back, I guess.
Let's see. Sorry, I lost track a little. Did everyone who wanted to answer that have a chance to answer?
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I love all of your question. I mean, your answers to this. All that came to mind was like, I know what I believe in abolition because of my queerness, because of queer and trans, like, you know, elders and ancestors that have like carved this path for us. And so like, that's all that comes to mind. Like, this is why I believe, because of our queerness, because of our transness. So.
Awesome. So I was just gonna say that to pass it over to you for the last question. So because we're gonna be switching to breakout rooms in just a second. But John, go ahead, ask your last question, and presenters, if you could keep your answers to this one relatively brief so we don't go too overtime.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Charlie, for like your wonderful co-facilitation. Thank you so much. You're like an amazing. You're just anyway. I wanted to ask, can folks share, if they want to, an organizing skill they find invaluable in abolition work? Right? Like random, like a question I got from somebody, but like, can you like, what is an organizing skill that you find invaluable in abolition work? And Dominique, if you would like to start, that would be dope. But if not, you can definitely pass it on to somebody.
I think I'll pass for the moment. Let me sit with that.
Boom,
Thank
boom.
you.
The first thing that comes to my mind is being willing to admit when I don't know the answer to something has been something I've been learning and trying to practice. And like, just like, I just really appreciate like, Sean, how you like acknowledged when you had said that word, and how Charlie intervened, and like just like how like the humility and like rolling with it that people have is just like such good skills for organizing, and I learn a lot from seeing it practiced. So thank you.
No, thank you for saying that. Really quickly, to add on to that, I think the best part was that like when you make mistakes like that, it feels very, very like, it just feels like it feels, I don't want to say humiliating because that makes it about yourself, right? But it definitely makes you feel a bit flustered. And I think the best part about it was the fact that people were like, hey, this is a learning experience. Like, we understand you're not a piece of shit, you know, and like we understand that it's a mistake being made. And, you know, like it was definitely like, it was, I don't know, I felt really good about that. And I felt like, not about the comment, I just felt really good about how that went. So like, it was easy to be able to correct oneself. I wanted to thank you for saying that.
I think I might try to answer this question. Something that stands out to me, and we've spoken about CUAV, is how healing centered and organizing spaces can feel like they're maybe in opposition. And so I don't know if it's necessarily like a interpersonal skill that is invaluable, or, you know, the word I'm trying to use, y'all, but it's like, it's not seeing it as like the togetherness. Like if we're focusing so much on, there's just, they're very different spaces sometimes. And the fact that like, they really are complementary. And so when we don't see it as like strategies and tools in the long run, then it feels unhelpful and or inefficient to me.
Yeah, like I'm all about feelings. And so like sharing like how folks are like genuinely like connecting with one another and sharing how you're doing and feeling is really has been a really helpful tool for me to build community and build like stronger movements with folks and stronger campaigns. And also the celebrating mistakes, which that has been mentioned a few times. Like that really is, that's helped me move through a lot of my own shit too. Like that shame and guilt that I carry sometimes, that like gets in the way of me building relationships with other people, or getting shit done. So relationship building, number one, and sharing feelings.
Just checking, because in trying to keep up with the schedule, I tend to lose track of who has spoken. Has everyone who wanted to answer this question done so? Cool. So now we're going to briefly move into breakout rooms. We are a little over time, so if you do need to head out, you know, please honor your time, honor your body, honor your needs. But we're going to be spending a we're going to be spending a couple of minutes in breakout rooms, and I believe some of the coordinators will be handling the logistics of that. And there's no specific prompt, just a place to debrief and to, you know, express any initial thoughts, reactions, basically, you know, kind of just talking about what we just heard. So we'll be transitioning into that now.
Oh, wait, hold on. Before we go into breakout rooms, it's optional for the speakers to join. So you all could just take a rest and then call it a night too. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Dominique and Lydia.